ABC 7's Emily Burris got caught up in the middle of it all.
We are live on Siesta Key.
We are live on the road in Charlotte County.
We are just south of the Juneau Pier. Tonight we're live in Daytona. We are live in Juneau Beach covering Hurricane Matthew. Emily Burris, ABC 7. We'll send it back to you. Tonight, you can see why so many counties, why so many cities have issued mandatory evacuation orders up and down the East Coast. Take a look here. I want to show you some of the conditions we're now experiencing. It's starting to calm down now tonight. You can probably see over my shoulder. We're still getting some wind gusts. The trees are moving around, but nothing like what we saw earlier today. We are seeing some heavy, sustained winds picking up from the gusts that we saw earlier. Just in the last half hour here at Siesta Beach, we had some trees come crashing down when the winds really picked up here, and we're starting to see a stronger band come through. Come over to this tree trunk here. You can actually see a huge crack. This tree bent over, and the top half is what's on the ground here behind me. This is what the beach looks like now. Not exactly a good place to put down your towel. Proof that this storm is having an impact on business across the state. We're going into a holiday weekend here, and downtown was empty. We are really starting to see the strength of this storm. One of those feeder bands coming through now. The rain, the wind really picking up. As conditions worsened, we moved inland. We're a little ways in so that we're away from that storm surge, but we are still experiencing, as you can see and hear, some pretty steady wind and rain. We're at a hotel in Daytona. We had to take shelter here earlier today when Hurricane Matthew was churning just off the coast of Daytona Beach. We're less than a mile from Daytona International Speedway and a really popular stretch of the beach here. But tonight, thousands, including our crews, are spending the night in the dark as Hurricane Matthew churns north. Hours of heavy rain and dangerous winds battered the east coast of Florida as Hurricane Matthew moved up the state Friday. But tonight, some are counting their blessings.
We were expecting worse, way worse.
Pamela Lesser and her husband rode out the storm on the banks of the Indian River in the home they're renovating. She showed us the water practically up to her doorstep. She says if Matthew had moved inland, they'd be flooded.
We were very prepared to possibly have to evacuate during the storm. The damage here isn't pretty, but nothing is structural and nothing is, that we can't fix.
As we drove north, we found others weren't so lucky. More than 1 million customers lost power as Matthew pummeled the state. Rain and wind bringing down trees, making highway travel treacherous. Some of the worst damage being discovered along the First Coast and Central Florida. Winds and waves turning docks into debris in Daytona Beach.
This is the most intense hurricane I've ever chased.
Despite mandatory evacuations and curfews in many coastal communities, some couldn't stay away, witnessing the devastation firsthand.
The damage wasn't as catastrophic as it could have been, but it's certainly devastating. Daytona Beach and the whole East Florida coast.
Crews are now working around the clock to try and restore power to this area and many other counties up and down the east coast of Florida. We've been without power for several hours, and many families will be spending tonight in the dark. In the meantime, officials are cautioning Floridians stay inside tonight. Even though most of Hurricane Matthew has moved north, there are still crews out working to restore those downed power lines and clear debris from the roads. Best to stay inside and give it a little more time before things turn around. Tonight we're live in Daytona. Emily Burris, ABC 7.
Now, ABC 7's promise is to always get you more, and we're certainly doing that with Hurricane Matthew because we have reporters right now up and down the Florida coast.
Yeah, our ABC 7 weekend anchor Emily Burris is live in Daytona tonight, where she's been tracking the storm as it moves north. And Emily, tell us about where you've been and the condition that you've been seeing.
Yeah, Jeff, Krista, we had quite the interesting day. We actually started down in Juneau Beach. That's in Palm Beach County. And that was where some of those earlier models had showed Hurricane Matthew could possibly make landfall, have a large impact there on parts of the southern Florida coastline. So we started there bright and early this morning, and we quickly saw that a lot of the damage was happening further north of us. We actually tracked this storm as it moved up the coast of Florida through St. Lucie, Martin, Brevard counties, and along the way, we did see some of these scenes of devastation. We saw power lines down. We experienced a lot of rain, heavy wind. We ended our day here in Daytona Beach. Right now, we're in a hotel where we had to take shelter from this storm a little bit for this afternoon. And we have continued to see those heavy rain bands and wind bands moving through, really taking out parts of the Florida coastline up and down the state.
Now, Emily, the storm didn't move as far inland as some were expecting, which quite frankly is fantastic news for Florida. But I'm curious about the damage that you've seen. How widespread is it? How serious is it?
Yeah, we were talking to some folks today along the Indian River who said we were spared because had this storm gone even 20 miles further inland, we would be bringing you a very different story tonight. So even though Matthew did not technically make landfall in Florida, the western half of the storm still did a lot of damage. As we drove through I-95 up north along the coast, I want to show you some video here of some of the scenes we saw today. There were crews already out on the roads working to restore power. There are still tens of thousands of Floridians along the Treasure Coast without power tonight. There were winds bringing down trees, and a lot of those trees fell onto power lines. We actually had to reroute several times for live power lines down in the road. There were sheriff's deputies and first responders out actively trying to keep drivers away from some of those situations.
I know Matthew is moving past Daytona onto Jacksonville now, but the chaos remains in Daytona. Let's talk about why they don't want people running around all night out there.
Right. We actually just had some of the bridges open up. One of our crews was able to come off of Daytona Beach and into inland Daytona just within the last hour. They're letting people off the island. They're still not letting people on. They had closed those bridges because of the high sustained winds that we were seeing today. A lot of counties, a lot of cities still have curfews in place, many of them running through 7 a.m. tomorrow. They do not want people out on the roads. Even though most of the storm has moved past us here in Daytona, you can probably see and hear behind me still a lot of rain, a lot of wind that we're dealing with tonight. And part of the reason that they don't want people out on the road is those power lines that I mentioned earlier. A lot of the issues that we have often come after the storm has moved through. People think it's safe. They think the coast is clear. They want to go outside and see some of the damage, and they find themselves walking or driving through these puddles of water that are electrically charged, and that can be dangerous, even deadly. So again, that's why we have some curfews in place, and officials still warning everyone, stay indoors. Give it more time. Let it ride out tonight before you head out to survey too much of the damage.
All right. Thank you so much, Emily, for that on-site report from Daytona Beach.